Bob spent 34 years working at a logistics company in Ohio, drove a used car, packed his lunch, skipped vacations, maxed his 401k every single year since 1991. At age 62, he finally crossed the finish line everyone told him to aim for, $1 million. He told his wife over dinner. She cried. He put in his retirement notice the next morning. 14 months later, Bob is back at work, part-time at a hardware store, 24 hours a week, because the math stopped working somewhere between the dream and reality. There's a woman in her late 50s, Linda. Financial advisor told her $1 million was the magic number. She hit it at 59 and a half, the exact age she could access her 401k without penalties. She pulled out $60,000 in year one. The IRS took $14,800 of that. Her state took another $3,600. She netted $41,600. After health care, she was too young for Medicare. She had about $900 a month left for everything else. And there's a guy I know personally who did everything by the book: diversified portfolio, low-cost index funds, annual rebalancing. Hit $1.2 million at 61. Felt bulletproof. Retired in early 2022, the market dropped 19.4% that year. He needed $50,000 to live on. He had to sell shares at the bottom. His portfolio never fully recovered to where he started. By his own calculation, that single bad year of timing cost him 6 years of retirement security. What's the pattern? They all believed the same lie, that $1 million is a retirement number. It isn't. It hasn't been for at least 15 years. And the financial industry, the media, the ads on YouTube, they never updated the story because the story sells products. Here's what we're actually doing today. I'm going to show you why $1 million in a traditional retirement account is not what you think it is after taxes, inflation, and healthcare. I'll show you the real math, not the calculator math, the after-tax, after-fee, after-healthcare cost math that nobody runs for you. We'll talk about return sequences, the single biggest retirement risk most people have never heard of. I'll walk through exactly what number you actually need, depending on how you're holding your money and when you plan to access it. And I'll give you a concrete protocol for whoever you are right now, whether you're at $100,000, $500,000, or already at $1 million, wondering why something still feels off. My name is Tom. I've been investing for over a decade. I've made every mistake in this video at least once. I run my own business, and I'm surrounded by accountants and fiscal lawyers. And I spent the last 3 months going through real tax data, real healthcare cost projections, and real withdrawal simulations because I was tired of people telling me $1 million was a finish line without showing me the actual math on the other side of it. If you're someone who's been told to just hit $1 million and you'll be fine, subscribe and like this video. It will help more than you think. By the way, I built a free retirement reality calculator because most online ones ignore taxes, ignore healthcare inflation, and use the kind of rosy return assumptions that make financial services companies look good and make you underprepared. Mine uses conservative projections modeled on Vanguard and BlackRock research. It'll show you your real number, after tax, after healthcare, after inflation. I only ask for your email to send the report so I don't store any of your financial data. Link is in the description. Think of your $1 million 401k as an iceberg. The part you can see above the water, the number on the statement, that's what everyone talks about. The part hidden below the surface, that's what actually sinks the ship. Below the waterline, there's federal income tax, there's state income tax, there's required minimum distributions that force you to pull money out on the government schedule, not yours. There's healthcare cost inflation, running at 5 to 6% annually, nearly double general inflation. There's the sequence of returns cliff, meaning if the market drops in the first 3 years you start withdrawing, you can permanently damage your portfolio even if the market fully recovers afterward. There's longevity risk, the terrifying possibility that you do everything right and just live longer than your money lasts. There's fee drag if you're still in expensive funds, and there's inflation quietly eating the real value of everything that remains.
The iceberg looks manageable from the boat. It is not manageable from the water. Let's get into the water. Here's the history you need to understand first, because this problem isn't new and it isn't an accident. In 1974, Congress passed the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, ERISA. Most people have never heard of it. It changed everything. Before ERISA, most American workers who stayed at a company long enough got a pension, a defined benefit. You work 30 years at Ford. Ford promises to pay you $2,400 a month for the rest of your life after retirement. Ford bears the investment risk. Ford has to make up the difference if markets underperform. After ERISA, a new kind of retirement account became available, the 401k, which technically became widespread after a 1980 IRS ruling that let employees defer wages into investment accounts pre-tax. And within a decade, corporations discovered something very convenient. Instead of promising a defined benefit, which required them to fund it, manage it, and absorb all the risk, they could just match a portion of employee contributions into a 401k and call it done. The corporate pension death didn't happen overnight. It was a slow dismantling over 30 years. In 1983, 62% of private sector workers with retirement plans had pensions. By 2022, that number was under 15%. Corporations shifted the entire investment risk onto individual employees, people who had no training in investing, no access to institutional research, no fiduciary obligation to get it right, just a menu of mutual funds and a pamphlet. Here's what makes this particularly brutal. The people who designed the shift knew workers were not equipped to manage this risk. Academic research going back to the 1980s showed that individual investors systematically underperform the market, buying high, selling low, chasing past performance, paying too many fees. Corporations knew this. They shifted the risk anyway, because their quarterly earnings mattered more than your retirement security. They weren't evil, they were rational. The system rewarded them for transferring the risk and punished them for absorbing it. The $1 million number came from this world. It became a cultural benchmark roughly in the 1980s and 1990s, when $1 million was a genuinely large sum relative to average incomes. The phrase millionaire carried weight. Retirement calculators from that era made $1 million the aspirational endpoint. Financial services companies ran ads with that number. Brokerage firms built entire marketing campaigns around helping you hit it. The number became emotionally encoded in the American retirement psychology. The problem is that it was never updated for reality. Let me show you the math. It is 2026. You have $1 million in a traditional 401k or IRA. You are 62. You want to retire. Not a crazy scenario. Sounds solid. Let's actually run the numbers. You want to withdraw $60,000 a year to live on. That's not lavish. It's about $5,000 a month. For most of the country, that's a pretty modest middle-class lifestyle. Groceries, utilities, a car payment, some dining out, maybe a vacation, no boat, no business class travel, just a comfortable, quiet life. First problem. That $60,000 doesn't come to you clean. In a traditional 401k or a traditional IRA, every dollar you withdraw is ordinary income. The IRS treats it exactly like a paycheck. There's no capital gains rate, no preferential treatment, just income tax. On $60,000 of annual withdrawal income, assuming you have minimal other income, your federal tax bill will be roughly $6,300 to $7,500 depending on your filing status and deductions. If you live in a state with income tax, add another $1,500 to $4,500 depending on where you are. California takes close to 7%. Ohio, where Bob lives, takes about 4%. Let's say you walk out with $49,000 after taxes on a $60,000 withdrawal. To get $60,000 in actual spendable money, you need to pull about $73,000 to $75,000 from the account. That changes your withdrawal rate dramatically. You thought you were pulling 6%.
You're actually pulling 7.3% to 7.5% on a $1 million account if you want $60,000 in your pocket. The 4% rule says your portfolio lasts 30 years if you withdraw 4% annually. At 7.5% effective withdrawal, the simulations get ugly fast. You're not looking at 30 years of security. Depending on market returns, you could be looking at 12 to 16. But wait, let's talk about the thing people underestimate most catastrophically: healthcare. If you retire before 65, you're not eligible for Medicare. You're on your own in the private insurance market. A 62-year-old couple in 2026 pays, on average, between $1,400 and $2,200 per month for a mid-tier health insurance plan, depending on state and plan. That's before deductibles, copays, and out-of-pocket costs for any actual medical care. Let's say you're a single person and you're paying $1,200 a month for decent coverage. That's $14,400 a year out of your $49,000 net. You now have $34,600 left for housing, food, transportation, and everything else. If you have a mortgage, you're in serious trouble. If you rent in most American cities, you're spending $1,200 to $2,000 a month on housing alone. The math doesn't work, and that's before we get to the required minimum distribution problem. At age 73, the IRS requires you to start withdrawing a minimum amount from your traditional 401k or IRA every year, regardless of whether you need the money. The amount is calculated by dividing your account balance,
Balanced by a life expectancy factor. At 73, the factor is roughly 26.5, meaning you must withdraw about 3.8% of your account. By age 80, the factor shrinks to 20.2, so you must withdraw about 5% whether you want to or not. Why does this matter? Because it can spike your income in a year when you don't need it, push you into a higher tax bracket, trigger additional Medicare surcharges, and reduce the long-term compounding power of money you didn't actually want to touch. The government set an expiration date on your tax deferral. They want their cut, and they collect it on their schedule. Here's the thing about the psychological trap that sits underneath all of this. The number on your 401k statement creates a feeling of safety. A profound, deep cellular feeling of safety. You see $1 million and something in your brain relaxes. You made it. The decades of anxiety, of tight budgets, of watching every dollar, they're over. The feeling is real. The math behind it is not. That emotional release is exactly when people stop doing the accounting. They stop pressure testing the numbers. They stop calculating the tax reality. They stop thinking about healthcare as a line item and start thinking of it as a problem for later. The feeling of safety is the trap. It closes your eyes at precisely the moment you need to see clearly. Let me show you what happens to Bob specifically, because Bob isn't unique. Bob is most people. Bob has $1.1 million in his 401k at 62. He and his wife spend about $68,000 a year. Their house is paid off, which is genuinely good. They're smarter than average. Bob's wife has a small pension from her teaching job, about $14,000 a year. Bob plans to take Social Security at 64. So Bob models it out. $68,000 spending minus $14,000 pension equals $54,000 he needs from the portfolio. Divide by $1.1 million, that's a 4.9% withdrawal rate. Higher than the 4% rule, but close enough, right? And once Social Security kicks in at 64, he'll only need about $38,000 from the portfolio. Sounds manageable. But Bob didn't run the tax math. Bob's $54,000 withdrawal from a traditional 401k plus his wife's $14,000 pension equals $68,000 in taxable income. Federal tax on that is roughly $7,600 to $9,200, depending on deductions.
They live in Pennsylvania, which taxes retirement income, at another $1,700 minimum. Bob needs to pull $65,000 from the portfolio to net $54,000 to spend. That's a 5.9% effective withdrawal rate. And they don't have health care yet. Bob is 62, his wife is 60. They're paying $2,100 a month in health insurance premiums. That's $25,200 a year coming straight out of what they thought they had. Bob's advisor, a very nice guy named Jerry, ran the original calculation. Jerry looked at the pension income, looked at the investment balance, and said, "Bob, you're in great shape. Run the retirement calculator on our website, and you'll see you've got more than enough." Bob says, "Jerry, I just found out we're paying $25,200 a year just for insurance before we see a single doctor. That doesn't seem to be in your calculator." Jerry says, "Well, Bob, healthcare costs are hard to predict. We generally recommend clients keep some cushion for unexpected expenses." "Jerry, that's not unexpected. That's a fixed bill that hits every month, and it's going up 6% a year. In 10 years, that's $45,000 a year just in premiums if we stay healthy." Jerry is quiet, because Jerry's retirement calculator doesn't have a healthcare field. Jerry's firm built that calculator to show people they're on track. If the calculator showed people they weren't on track, people wouldn't stay with Jerry's firm, and Jerry wouldn't get paid. Jerry isn't malicious. He's a product of a system that profits from your confidence and not your clarity. Bob isn't stupid. Bob isn't irresponsible. Bob did everything the system told him to do, and the system told him an incomplete story. That's not a bug. That's the feature. Think about that for a second. The financial services industry earns a percentage of assets under management, typically 0.5 to 1.5% annually on whatever they're holding for you. A $1 million client generates $5,000 to $15,000 a year in fees passively, without doing anything for you beyond keeping your account. Their incentive is for you to feel secure enough to keep the assets with them, not for you to understand the tax reality of withdrawals, not for you to fully grasp healthcare cost inflation, not for you to see the sequence of returns math that might make you restructure your entire portfolio. Their incentive is management. Your incentive is survival. Those are different goals. Here's where it gets really interesting. There are people who do crack the code, who retire comfortably on assets that would terrify the average financial planner. The secret isn't a bigger number. The secret is the structure. The difference between a traditional 401k and a Roth IRA is the difference between paying taxes on the seed and paying taxes on the harvest. In a traditional account, you got the tax deduction when you put money in. You pay taxes when you take it out, on the full amount, including all the decades of growth. In a Roth, you contributed after-tax money. Every single dollar of growth comes out tax-free in retirement. No RMDs on a Roth IRA, no income spikes, no bracket management, just clean, tax-free withdrawals forever. A person with $700,000 in a Roth IRA in many scenarios ends up with more spendable money than a person with $1 million in a traditional 401k. The headline number is smaller, the real money is larger. This is the math nobody shows you when you're 35 and optimizing for the current year tax deduction. Let's run the comparison directly. Traditional 401k, $1 million, $60,000 withdrawal needed, combined federal and state tax of 18%. You need to pull $73,200 to get $60,000 in hand. Your effective withdrawal rate on the actual balance is 7.3%. Roth IRA, $700,000. You need $60,000. You pull $60,000. Withdrawal rate is 8.6% of the balance, but zero of it goes to taxes. Net result, the $700,000 Roth person has more flexibility, fewer forced decisions, and lower exposure to future tax rate increases than the $1 million traditional person. And if tax rates go up, which historically they do when governments are running deficits. The Roth person is insulated. The traditional 401k person takes the full hit. There's a second structural factor almost nobody talks about: Social Security taxation. Most people assume Social Security is tax-free income. It is not. Once your combined income, meaning Social Security benefits plus any other income, crosses $25,000 for a single person or $32,000 for a couple, up to 50% of your Social
Security benefits become taxable. Cross $34,000 or $44,000 respectively, and up to 85% of your benefits are taxable. The thresholds were set in 1983 and have never been adjusted for inflation. Millions of retirees who were promised a tax-free benefit are now being taxed on it, not because they're wealthy, because inflation dragged their income across a 4-decade-old threshold. So Bob's picture gets worse. Once Bob starts taking Social Security at 64, roughly $22,000 to $27,000 a year based on his work history, that Social Security income is partially taxable, depending on his total combined income. He could lose another $3,000 to $5,000 a year to taxes he wasn't planning on. Bob told me, "Look, I thought I was doing this right. I thought the 401k was the smart move, and I maxed it for 34 years. And every dollar I contributed, I saved maybe 22 to 24 cents on taxes. And now I'm pulling it out, and the government wants 18 to 22%, and Social Security is partially taxable, and healthcare is $2,100 a month, and the calculator said I was fine. At what point was I supposed to know the calculator was lying?" He wasn't. That's the honest answer. The information exists. It's scattered across IRS publications, actuarial tables, academic papers on safe withdrawal rates, but it has never been assembled into plain English and handed to ordinary people at the moment they needed it. That's not an accident. It's a design feature. Here's the other monster hiding under the water, the one that can destroy a perfect plan with nothing more than bad timing. You retire on January 1st, 2027, with $1 million. Markets are near all-time highs. Your advisor says, historically, markets correct eventually, but you're diversified, you'll be fine. In 2027, the market drops 28%. Your million is worth $720,000, but you still need $60,000 to live on. After taxes, you pull $73,000 from the account. That's a 10.1% withdrawal rate on a depleted portfolio. You're left with $647,000. The market recovers partially in 2028, up 12%, you're at $724,000. But you pull another $73,000. You're at $651,000. The same in 2029, 2030. You're on a ratchet that only moves one direction, and the market hasn't done you any favors. The mathematical reality of this is brutal. If you retire into a flat or declining market in the first 3 to 5 years, you can permanently impair your portfolio, even if the market fully recovers afterward, because you sold shares at the bottom to buy groceries. You converted paper losses into real losses. You have less capital to participate in the recovery. The sequence killed you, even though the average return over the full period was fine. Run the scenario in reverse. Same person, same million, same $73,000 annual withdrawal, but the market goes up 20% in the first year before it crashes. Your portfolio is at $1,200,000 minus $73,000 equals $1,127,000 before the crash. Now a 28% drop puts you at $811,000. But you pull another $73,000. You're at $738,000. You survived. Same crash, totally different outcome, because timing. This is the cruelest math in retirement planning. You can do everything right for 35 years, save correctly, invest correctly, not panic once, and whether you build lasting wealth or destroy it in the first decade of retirement can come down to the calendar year you happen to retire in. The psychology here is almost unbearable.
When you watch a portfolio drop 25% while you're still employed, it's painful but abstract. You're not selling, you're holding. You have a paycheck. You buy more on the dip if you're smart. When you're retired and that portfolio is your only income source, a 25% drop isn't abstract. It's
$250,000 gone. It's the difference between surviving and running out. The panic sell reflex, which our brains evolved for good reasons, to stop bleeding, becomes lethal when applied to a sequence of returns problem. Here's the actual protocol, the one I would use and have partially built into my own financial structure. First, know what you actually have, not the headline number, the after-tax number. If everything you have is in a traditional 401k, cut the balance by your expected effective tax rate on withdrawal, ballpark 15 to 25% depending on your state and income level. $1 million traditional 401k plus 20% tax rate means you functionally have $800,000. Plan accordingly. If you have Roth accounts, HSA accounts, or taxable brokerage accounts, those are worth differently than pre-tax money. Build a real net number. Second, price out healthcare before you declare victory. Go to healthcare.gov or call an insurance broker. Get an actual quote for your age, your state, and your expected income level. Bake that number into your annual budget as a non-negotiable line item and assume it grows at 5% per year. If you're 60 and paying $1,400 a month now, plan for $2,275 a month by 70. Yes, Medicare helps at 65, but Medicare is not free. Part B premiums, supplemental Medigap coverage, Part D prescription coverage, a 65-year-old couple today spends on average $7,000 to $12,000 per year on Medicare-related costs. It's not nothing. Third, build a cash buffer of 2 to 3 years of living expenses held separately from your investment portfolio, not in stocks, cash, or short-term treasuries. This is your sequence of returns shock absorber. If the market crashes in year 1 of your retirement, you spend the cash buffer and don't touch the portfolio. Historically, markets recover within 2 to 4 years. You replenish the buffer from the portfolio when it's healthy again. This single step dramatically improves the probability that your portfolio survives a bad sequence. Yes, holding that cash drags on long-term returns slightly. It doesn't matter. You're buying insurance against the scenario that wrecks everything. Fourth, strongly consider delaying Social Security. Every year you delay from 62 to 70, your benefit grows by 6 to 8%. At 62, you get your reduced early benefit. At 70, you get 132% of your full benefit. If you live to 82, 83, which is roughly average for someone who makes it to 62, you almost always collect more total money by waiting. You also avoid the partial taxation trap for longer, since you're not adding Social Security to your other income. Use portfolio withdrawals to bridge the gap between retirement and 70 if you can. The math strongly favors waiting. Fifth, if you haven't started converting traditional IRA or 401k money to a Roth account, look at Roth conversions now, especially in years when your income is lower, between retirement and Social Security, or during a market downturn when the values are depressed and conversion taxes are lower. This is not sexy, it's not a hack, it's tax planning. Every dollar you convert now is a dollar that grows tax-free and never faces required minimum distributions. Sixth, for anyone who is still accumulating, still years from retirement, stop thinking about your number in gross terms. Think about your after-tax number. Think about your healthcare adjusted number. Build a real picture. The gross balance on your 401k statement is not your retirement. It's a starting point for a calculation most people never finish. Let's talk about what success actually looks like, because I don't want to leave you just with dread. There are people who retire early and thrive, and they share specific habits. There's a woman I know named Sarah, 58 years old, $950,000 total, but $380,000 of that is in a Roth.
another $220,000 in a taxable brokerage account, $350,000 in a traditional IRA. Her annual expenses are $46,000. She retired at 56. Her strategy is elegant. She lives off the taxable brokerage account and keeps her taxable income low enough to stay in the 0% long-term capital gains bracket for federal taxes. She uses those low-income years to do small Roth conversions, moving traditional IRA money to Roth at minimal tax cost. At 65, she gets Medicare. At 70, she takes Social Security, which she delayed, at a dramatically higher benefit. The Roth IRA she built over 25 years has never been touched and compounding with zero tax drag. She structured her income to minimize tax exposure across decades, not just in a single year. She didn't have a higher number, she had a smarter structure. Sarah's husband, who works part-time doing consulting work he enjoys, adds another $30,000 a year to the household. Between her structured withdrawals and his optional income, they live on $76,000 with very little financial stress and zero compromise on their lifestyle. They are not wealthy by traditional metrics. They are structurally free. That's the real thing worth chasing, not a number, a structure that gives you options regardless of what the market does, what the tax law does, what healthcare does. Flexibility beats a bigger pile every single time. Here's the thing about the cultural mythology around $1 million. It was a reasonable target in 1990, when $1 million adjusted to today's purchasing power was something like $2.3 million. When pensions still existed, and most people had both Social Security and a pension covering the majority of their income. When healthcare was a smaller percentage of household spending. When people retired at 65 and died at 72. Meaning 7 years of portfolio duration, not 30. None of those conditions exist today. Healthcare is the largest expense growth area in most retirement budgets. Pensions are gone for 85% of private sector workers. Social Security is partially taxable and facing long-term structural funding challenges. Life expectancy for someone who reaches 65 is now 84 to 87. People are funding 25 to 30 years of retirement, not 7. The math has completely changed. The cultural target has not. The system benefits from that lag. Brokerages and financial planners manage assets. They earn fees on assets. If you hit $1 million and feel comfortable enough to leave the money where it is and stop obsessing over the fine print, they win. Your confidence is their product. Your informed anxiety would cost them business. I'm not saying don't save. I'm not saying investing is rigged. Index funds are still the greatest wealth-building tool available to ordinary people. Compound interest is still magic. The fundamentals work. What I'm saying is that the finish line is not where they drew it, and the rules of the game change the second you start drawing from the portfolio instead of adding to it. Nobody gives you the updated rulebook. You have to go find it. Here are your 3 takeaways. 1. Your $1 million 401k is not $1 million. It is $1 million minus taxes on every withdrawal, plus the drag of required minimum distributions after 73, plus exposure to sequence of returns risk the moment you start pulling money. Before you declare financial independence, calculate your after-tax number and build your plan from that. A $1 million traditional 401k with a 20% effective withdrawal tax rate is functionally an $800,000 asset. Plan from $800,000. 2. Healthcare is not an unexpected expense. It is a predictable inflation-compounding line item that belongs in your retirement budget with the same certainty as rent. If you're retiring before 65, price out your full insurance cost today and project it forward at 5% per year. If that number blows up your retirement budget, you haven't failed your plan. Your plan just didn't include the full picture yet. Fix the plan now, not after you quit. 3. The structure of your savings matters more than the size of your savings. A person with $800,000 across a combination of Roth accounts, taxable brokerage accounts with low-cost index funds, and a small cash buffer can outperform a person with $1.3 million locked inside a single traditional 401k in states with high income tax. Diversifying account types is not a bonus step. It is a core part of retirement planning that most people don't hear about until it's expensive to fix. The million-dollar myth doesn't die because it's too useful to too many people. To the mutual fund companies running Super Bowl ads, to the brokerages publishing retirement readiness surveys, to the financial advisors who earn fees on assets under management, the myth keeps people invested, keeps them confident, keeps them from asking the uncomfortable math questions. Here's the real number, not the number you want to hear, the honest one. For a couple in a moderate-cost state, retiring at 62, needing $60,000 a year in spendable income, holding primarily traditional retirement accounts, covering their own health care until Medicare, and needing the portfolio to last 30 years, the target is not $1 million. The target, accounting for taxes, healthcare inflation, and sequence risk, is closer to $1.6 to $1.9 million. With Roth optimization, a small pension equivalent, and a willingness to do small amounts of optional work in early retirement, you can get the real number down to $1.2 to $1.4 million, still not $1 million. You don't have to be scared by that. You have to be honest. Honest plans survive. Comfortable myths don't. The math is easy. The psychology of facing it is not. But the people who do face it, who run the real numbers, not the fantasy projections, those are the people who actually retire and stay retired. Not because they were luckier, not because they earned more, because they stopped asking the question they wanted the answer to and started asking the question they needed the answer to. If you want to see exactly how I run my own after-tax retirement projections, including the specific spreadsheet logic I use to calculate sequence of return scenarios, there's a video on my channel walking through it step by step. No affiliate links, no product recommendations, just the actual math. Hit subscribe if this video changed the number you're building toward. Drop a comment and tell me what your actual after-tax retirement number is. I read them all.